Police Minister Bheki Cele presented crime statistics for the first 3 months of 2022 on Friday, painting a rather grim picture. The quarter stats show an increase in murders, contact crimes, sexual violences and assaults compared to the same period in 2021. So we ask now what we can attribute this to, whether the police are simply overburdened or there's some incompetence involved. For that discussion, we're joined by author and policing expert Ziyanda Stuurman. Ziyanda, thank you very much for availing yourself this morning. We've spoken to a number of policing unions here on the channel over the days, and they have pointed out to low staff morale. They say that the police are simply not capacitated enough to deal with the problem. Essentially, the police also failing to police themselves or to at least protect themselves, never mind South Africans. When you heard the grim picture that was painted by the police minister on Friday, what went through your mind?
Good morning, and thank you for those questions. I think that they're all relevant, and I absolutely think that the input from police unions is relevant itself, as obviously their members are on the ground and work in many of the police stations that are reporting these crime stats. I do think for a second that it's necessary to step back and also think about the fact that the reporting period that's being compared between this year and last year also coincided with the sort of last effect or last waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. What this also meant is that crime stats were really, really difficult to interpret between 2020 and 2021, given curfews, sort of restrictions on movement, and other issues. So if we are talking about a large increase in these different categories of crimes, as you mentioned, between 2021 and 2022, I do think that that's also a factor that we need to keep in mind, that we would have seen large increases given that the 2020 and 2021 reporting years were very different from others. That's not to say, though, that all of the other things that you've just spoken about, low morale, low capacity within the police, and other issues aren't at play here as well.
I think you and I have spoken about this on a number of occasions in terms of what then needs to be done to turn the tide. The policing unions also spoke of the fact that the police or the men and women in blue are not getting paid enough. So some of them don't even have that incentive to go the extra mile or to put their own lives on the line. So when we speak of possible solutions in order to turn the tide, this is nothing new. Every year I think we gasp and we, oh, this is horrible. But it does not seem to be turning, if you will.
Yeah, I would. There has to be, I think, some pushback to what the unions are saying. I do think that that's a misdiagnosis of the issue. Police officers, on average, are paid really well, and particularly in South Africa, in a country where the average wage is 3,500 rand. Even your officer who's in basic training in police is paid more than that, at about 3,750 rand, while they also stay in residence at a training academy and receive meals, etc. I'm not saying that police officers are wealthy or rich. That's absolutely not the case. But what I am saying is that for the average worker out there, police officers are not doing badly. What I do think that this points to, and this is where I absolutely agree with unions, is that there isn't enough support within the police structure for your frontline police officers who are going out on patrol every day or who might not have the necessary equipment or support, again, to do their job. That is definitely a complicating factor. And as anybody, if you had to show up to work every day and you didn't have the necessary tools to do your job, and you were then asked to place yourself in harm's way or in danger to protect citizens, I absolutely agree with them that people would then be discouraged, disincentivized, and would feel like the institution that they work for does not support them.
Ziyanda, when we compare ourselves with what other countries on the continent are doing from a policing point of view, and I guess essentially that translates to a safety point of view, you feel safer outside sometimes the borders of South Africa. If you look at Rwanda, you look at Zimbabwe, yes, there are nuances in these countries, right? So when especially we look at politically, the driving factors behind that. But how are we faring in comparison to other countries on the continent where our police are concerned?
Yeah, I think that there are two ways to sort of answer that question. I think the first is to recognize that much of our crime problem is actually a societal problem. It's not just a policing problem. If we look at the increase in, for example, gender-based violence and sexual assault cases, that's not, or it can't only be solved by the police, right? That there's a really deep psychosocial issue there that really is an indictment on our society that doesn't make our country safe for women and children and other marginalized groups. So that on its own, you can't expect a police officer to be in every single home, which is the majority of where those categories of crime occur. On the other hand, I think, if we're sort of talking about police capacity in other countries as well, I think that there is a lot that our police service does and gets right that simply doesn't exist in other countries. But again, there's this interplay between the society itself and the police service. If you're talking about countries or societies where there aren't as high levels of crime, or even then as high levels of social dysfunction, I think that the police function completely differently in those cases as well. And it is really difficult to do a comparison country by country because our societies, our economies, and our cultures and ideologies aren't quite the same.
Fair enough. Can we just take this moment to give a big shout out to the men in blue who actually do a stellar job in spite of very difficult circumstances, who continue to show up for you and I?
Absolutely. I think that that's a critical part of any discussion that we have about policing, that there are good police officers. Similarly, there are good lawyers and litigators within the NPA who work really hard every day. We may be seeing what isn't good police work or what isn't good prosecution work with the Senzo Meyiwa trial, for example, but that's not the case of every single member of the NPA or the SAPS. There are very good people within our criminal justice system working to do good work within a highly dysfunctional area.